My name is Mary Edna Baggett. I was born in Bentonville, Arkansas on March the 19th, 1931. My parents were Lonis and Edna Baggett.
And tell me a little bit about them. First your dad, then your mom.
Well, my dad was the greatest guy in the world, and my mother was the most talented pianist I've ever heard, and they were so much more besides that. But they were wonderful, loving parents, part of our life, every day of it.
Tell me about your siblings.
I have a brother 3 years younger than I am. My brother is Carl Baggett, lives in Rogers. My two sisters are deceased. My youngest sister died 4 years ago, and my middle sister died in September of this year. Their name was Thelma and Alice.
So, tell us about growing up. Where did you go to school and what was it like?
All four of us went to Bentonville schools, and Carl and I went only to Old High, which was grades 1 through 12. But we both went all of our years there. Thelma and Alice have been part of the younger generation, and they've been to different schools around town.
So tell us about what was the old school like, and what do you remember from the beginning all the way through? Some of your memories.
I remember they had a clown that scared me to death, so I've always sort of been eerie of clowns. But I had wonderful teachers. I guess I fell in love with every teacher that I had from first grade through high school.
Who are some of the names that stand out, some of the teachers you remember?
I don't know that I can tell you who would stand out, but I know I loved Miss Pickering in the second grade, Juanita Wyman in the third grade, Miss Greer in the fourth grade, Ruth Barker in the fifth grade, and then when I got to sixth grade was Ruth Barker, and then when I got to seventh grade, I had multiple teachers, and I don't remember all of them, but my favorite was Miss Stewart, because she liked me better than anybody else.
What was the town like? What did you and your siblings do in town for fun when you were kids?
Well, in the summertime we played Annie Over, Red Rover, Kick the Bucket, Kick the Can. We walked on stilts. We had a lot of cousins who lived here early on, so families were together. We were usually making ice cream, and we kids were playing hide and seek and just the old games that kids have played all their lives.
Now, at some point, where did you live when you were a kid, and then maybe where did you move later? Tell me about that.
Well, I lived in Bentonville on 410 Northwest 3rd Street, and then we moved to the farm. Daddy thought we ought to have room to run and to play and to work and to learn how to work and handle a job. And we didn't like it very well because it was small, it was a lot of work to do. We didn't have electricity for about a year. But then after we learned to get used to all the country, it was quiet, no street lights, nothing in the country. But we had a family life that was active and busy, so life was good.
So where was the farm and compared to now?
If you know where the Bentonville jail is, on 102, it was across the street behind the Christian church, 25 acres.
So describe it. What was the farm like?
Well, the farm had a well that was very intriguing to us. We didn't have to get our water from that, but my mother was scared to death we were going to drown because we'd get over it and hang out hang over to look inside, but she wouldn't let us play around it because that was real enticing to us.
So tell me about your family, your husband and kids.
Well, unfortunately, I have had 3 husbands. Susan's daddy was my first husband, Harold Turner. He was in the Navy when we first met, and then he got out before we kept dating, and then we married in the next year, and we were together for 13 years, and we had Susan, and she's been the joy of my life. And then I was married briefly. Then I was married to Bob Burns, who was an undertaker, and we had 21 really wonderful years. And then we divorced, and I remarried a guy from the north, and it was not a good one. It didn't last very long. But I've been a happy single woman, so life is good.
So tell me, how did you first get involved in politics? What?
I was an admirer of my Uncle Jim as just the best person in our family. He was fun, he was interesting, he drove fast, he always had a good car, and then he got into politics and was in the Bentonville City Council for 14 years. I idolized him. He was a great, fun guy. And so I just wanted to be part of the city life that goes on when you're part of the council, making the rules and regulations. And it's been a joy.
So what was it like when you first got on there, and then talk about the changes you noticed over the years? What year did you get started, and then kind of walk me through it?
I went on the council in 73, I believe it was, and it was very interesting. It was all men. They were all older men. It was pretty much do what we've always done. Who you knew made a difference. And I never felt like they were as interested in what the citizens thought as they should be. They were good people, for sure. They were funny people. I enjoyed them. But I just always thought elected officials needed to be responsive to the public, the people who elect them. They're to represent them. And they were very weak in that area.
Any examples you can think of?
Not right off the top of my head.
What were, in the early 70s, what were the issues facing the Bentonville City Council?
Well, I have to tell you that the thing that made me run for office, Ernie Lawrence was a wonderful guy, and he was a great mayor, but he was bringing things to us we had never heard of. He said we were going to have trash bags, and I could not see what our small number of people would need to have a trash service. But we were all kind of up in arms over that. I thought, I'm just going to run for city council. And so then Bob Fuquay, who was the coach of the school, he decided to run against me. He said, if I can't beat a woman, I'll just quit. So I beat him. And I don't think I had an official platform. I didn't know enough. But I thought my job was to represent my people. So that was my focus. And along the way, we did get trash bags, and now I don't see how we'd live without them. So I had to give Ernie his just dues over it.
What was he like as mayor?
He was wonderful. He was really wonderful. I liked him very much, but I just thought he could not sell that to the citizens of Bentonville. But he did, because he had a kind attitude. He was responsive. When people would ask him questions, he could answer it and make sense. And it went over big time. I was proved really wrong.
So how long did you talk about how long you were on the council and some of the things you did while you were there?
Well, the trash bags was the biggest thing, for sure. But, you know, compared to the last few years, it was nothing. A lot of our work was passing ordinances on new ventures in the city, you know, ordinances for setbacks, ordinances for all the rules and regulations for the planning commission. And people were beginning to move into Bentonville. So things were changing pretty quickly.
So talk about the politics of Benton County. At one point, like all of Arkansas, Benton County was all Democrats, or I guess that's all they called themselves.
Yes.
And then eventually Benton County became the first county in the state to switch, and now that's most.
I don't believe you could have found 20 Republicans in Benton County in those years. However, City Council is not a Democrat or Republican. Neither is the Quorum Court. And I would have been out of luck because I'm a proud Democrat. And so I've always been glad I didn't, till later years on the court, I could barely beat a Republican. But I managed to 2 terms.
So how long were you on the court?
Well, I think I went on in the 80s. I've got it all in those papers, but I haven't taken time to figure it out. I think 3 terms on the Quorum Court. I know the last time I ran, my mother had just died, and I had not finished 1 or 2 subdivisions going door to door. But after about a week, I thought, I've got to get back out and finish. And the first door I went to, they expressed their sadness over my mother's loss. I couldn't go any further. I went back home. I just was too raw yet. But I won.
You won the race? How much? What was this?
I don't remember. Maybe I didn't have. No, that wouldn't have been if I hadn't had opposition. Yeah, I would have campaigned. I did. I did campaign even when I didn't have opposition, because I thought people need to know I'm still willing to work for them. So I did.
What were some of your most proud accomplishments on the city council?
You know, I don't remember having any outstanding accomplishments. It was just, the meetings were short. There was not a lot of business. I remember one time we tried to clean up Briartown. It was a mess. People living in trailers, and the trailers had mice, but those people didn't want to be bothered. They didn't want the city down there taking up their time. But, you know, I'm just almost blank because it's been so long back in those days how different it was.
Let's talk about how you eventually went from city to county government. How did you make that switch, and why did you do it?
Well, I didn't run for office for a little bit. 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I don't remember what my motivation for county was. I think I just wanted to get back into politics, and I didn't know anything about it, and that was the same with city council. I knew of it, but I didn't know about it. And the Quorum Court, I've always said, every citizen ought to run for the city council and for the Quorum Court to know how they function and what they do and why they do it. And I still believe that. You'd be a lot more understanding if you knew, especially today. It's tough. It's really tough. You know, people are angry today. It's a different world from what I first went on to the council and the court.
When did you first get on the Quorum Court, and what were some of the issues that you were looking at then?
Well, I believe it was 85, somewhere around 85. We were needing to do zoning and planning in the county. Well, when I went on the Quorum Court, it was a bunch of farmers. They didn't want anything to do with zoning. They didn't want anything to do with land use. They didn't want anything to bother their farms. Today, we see why we should have started a long time ago with planning and zoning. But that was a hot issue. That was my driving force, was to try to get land use where we could have stopped a lot of our problems if we'd had planning back there. We just kind of had to start in the middle of everything. But, and that's what the city council is doing a lot now, trying to make ordinances to allow for all the people who are moving in, for all the additional streets we need, for all the additional everything we need. We're almost running out of land, I think, sometimes. They're building the houses closer together. They're building them 3 stories high. It's interesting to me, but I think we'll run out of land if people keep coming in here. But it's been a welcome. I mean, now we can put our kids to work when they get out of school. We used to have to leave Bentonville. There wasn't any jobs. We had the chicken plant, Kraft cheese plant, which was a way step up in salary and everything. But you know, we've got lots of different companies in here now paying good salaries.
Speaking of companies, talk about your career path. Where all did you work? Didn't you work at one? You mentioned earlier that you worked at the bank. Can you talk some of the places you worked over the years? There may be too many to list them all, but what are some of the ones you remember?
My first job was for my aunt washing fruit jars. I got 10 cents a fruit jar from my aunt for my first job. Then my first job was at the Horseshoe Cafe. I washed dishes. It was a family restaurant. And then I got promoted to waitress, and I made tips. I didn't know what a tip was. I took the lady's money back up to the cash register because I thought she had left it. But I worked there during school, I think. And my first job was Carroll Electric. I was a cashier at Carroll Electric. That was the best job I'd ever had. No. Yeah, that's right. Then I worked there 3 or 4 years. No, before that I was a secretary to Eugene Caulfield. If you ever heard that name.
Tell
He
me
was
about
a
it.
rambunctious, I love that guy. But I did that a year. Then I went to the Bank of Bentonville, the old bank over on the corner. Then we built a new bank on the other corner. And then Sam Walton bought the bank, and it was a different world. We didn't just stand around. We worked every minute. We dusted or we did whatever that needed to be done, because Sam wanted us to look busy. We didn't like that too much, but things were moving and changing, and we liked that prosperity growth that was presented to us. And then I had my baby, and I didn't work for quite a little while. Then I went to work. After I ran for office, I served 1 year. I served a year and a half of my term. Then I went to work for Ernie Lawrence, the mayor. He wanted me to work with him. And I did that, and he didn't run for office the next time. And I had the baby. And then I went to work for Clayton Little and Judge Enfield. Then I went back to the city working assistant to the mayor, who was a new mayor then. I think I worked for 6 mayors, or I think that's how many.
Can you tell me the mayors you worked for? Do you remember them?
Well, I worked for, let's see, I don't know if I can get them in the right order. Steve Marcus, C.E. Lou Allen, after Ernie. This was after Ernie. And then Richard Hoback. And then I went, I ran for mayor, or somebody ran me for mayor. Somebody put my name on, signed up for me, because I'd been working for all the mayors, and they thought I was I didn't really want it. I knew what a headache it was, but I worked. There was 3 of us running. I won in the primary, and then I lost in the general. Steve Birchie became our new mayor, and we didn't have a bad campaign. I mean, I never talked against him. He never talked against me, but he didn't think we could work together, me as his secretary and him the mayor. So he moved me to the library at the same salary, which was $18,000, I think. And the city was in an uproar over that. You'll find pictures in there. The reporters followed me around, taking my picture at my work at the library. They gave Steve heck about it. But it was a good time for me to be at the library. Low stress. My husband left me, and I was just devastated. So I just stayed at the library, and that was perfect. Then I found out he was having an affair, and that was another blow. And then about 3 years, I really enjoyed that work. I thought, I'm ready for more excitement, more interest. I'm ready for something serious. I went to prayer meeting that night, and I came home, and I had a message. Wayne Lawson at the Bates Hospital had left me a message to call him. And he said, Mary, my assistant has left me today. She was in the National Guard. Said she's going to be leaving. I wanted to know if you would come to work for me. And I guess he never said anything about it, but he'd read all this stuff about the mayor firing me, put me over in the library. And I said, Wayne, it's just ironic that I'm just ready for more serious work. And he said, well, come on out and let me talk to you tomorrow. And I knew the price I would have to quit my job. And the next day when we talked, he gave me just a little bit more than I thought I had to have. But the best thing about it was Wayne and his family had lived over a block behind us on 3rd Street. They lived on 4th Street. So he was part of my play party. During those years we lived over there, there's a whole bunch of us kids. And I was at the hospital. I loved that job. And that was, of all the good bosses I've had, that was the best boss. After Wayne retired, they hired a man named Tom O'Neill from Ohio. And Tom was one of the smartest men. He happened to have a wife that was a caterer. And she and I got her into the symphony, and we did a lot of stuff for the Symphony Guild here in Bentonville, had a lot of parties and raised a lot of money. And then hospitals all began to dissolve, and they merged, and Bates merged and built a new hospital, and they let Tom go. I don't know why. He was the smartest man. But his wife has passed away, but I still stay in touch. Tom lives in Springdale now, and he's been up to eat lunch and supper, and one night we had his chief nurse come up to be with us. So I still miss him, but he was one fine boss. When I was running late, he was right there helping me put stuff together, and I've never seen anyone quite like him. But he was a joy, he and his wife both. And then, after 9 years, I retired. And every evaluation I'd say, now Tom, I'm going to quit when I'm 65. He'd say, why are you going to quit? And I'd say, well, I'll tell you. When I went to Carroll Electric, they had a 90-year-old woman in there working. And I said, she was so crabby, you couldn't please her. And I said, I decided I wasn't going to work till I was crabby. I was going to quit while I was still happy and good. And he said, I wish I could talk you out of that. And I said, no, you can't. Then I had a little townhouse downtown right across from the funeral home. They were having a funeral one day and they had new owners. And I walked over and I said, if you ever need me to answer the phone while you're having a funeral, or you need me to drive a hearse, I'd be glad to. I said, I've watched all the movies and I've eaten all the popcorn I can. I'm tired of retirement. And he said, well, why don't you get your license? And I said, oh, what's that take? He said, he told me. And so I did that. It took me 3 years to get my apprentice served. I got my funeral director's license, and I was a funeral director for 9 years at Baxter and Pike Funeral Home. It was a new funeral home, and that was interesting. I'd been married to a funeral director, but I had not worked in the business.
Tell me more about this. What years was this? And
at Baxter and Pike.
Yeah. So you bought it when, or I mean, you got started there when? Tell me about this.
About 95, I believe, or 96. Yeah, I'm old. They've asked me at the hospital sometimes, how long have you worked? And I said, I can't remember not working, but anyway, Baxter and Pike merged with the Springdale Funeral Home, and I decided, I drove a few months, but I didn't like driving that much, and so I told them I just was going to resign. Well, the next week, they called me from Arvest, wanted to know if I'd come to work part-time at the financial center. So I did. I worked 5 more years, and then Elvis Moody had been trying to get me to come to work for his funeral home, and then I did finally. I finally went to work part-time, and now Elvis has sold to Scott Burnham. You know Scott at Burnham in Fayetteville? Well, I work for his family now, and they're the best ones yet. I still work when they call me on, a lot of times people call and want to know if I'm still with the funeral home and they want me to come work. So I do a visitation. Sometimes I work a funeral, but it's at my leisure. If I'm busy, I don't feel forced to do it. They just like to have me around because I like being around them. So I worked, last week I worked 2 visitations. So that's how much I'm working now, just once in a while.
So you're 91 and you're still working?
Occasionally.
And you kept saying, you never said I applied for this job. You said people called me. How many jobs did you apply for, or just
I've never applied for one. There's always, you know, that's a God thing, Scotty. I believe God handles our life. I've had my trials and my hurts, but I've had a perfect life. It's not all been roses, but it's all been good. Can you believe that?
I believe that. That's very interesting. So you just get these calls and you just feel like that was meant to be?
I pretty much just leave it up to God. His will. I don't have very good will. I can get off, but I do believe that because I've thought back on that sometimes about never applying for a job. My nephew, who had worked for Walmart 30 years, they finally let him go. You know how they let people go every few years? But they said, take your time looking, and he had some really good interviews. Thought they were all going to be good, but they didn't turn up for over 2 years. And I thought how fortunate I was to never have to apply for a job.
Who are some of the friends I know there's probably dozens or hundreds, but who are some of the friends you've made over the years here in Bentonville?
Oh, Scotty, I want to tell you, well, I've got friends in low places and I've got friends in high places, and I'm almost determined that those in low places are the better ones than the high places. No, that's not true. Well, Jim and Janet Hendren are some of my good friends, Judge Jim. And of course, I've always been active in church. My lady friends from First Baptist Church, I moved to Vaughn Presbyterian Church to go to church with Susan when I retired. But I still, the girls come out for breakfast or lunch sometimes and everybody couldn't believe I was moving to the country. So I've had to show them I live in the country, and I've had lunch almost more days than not, and supper. Randy and Valerie Lawson, do you know them? Randy owns quite a bit of stuff downtown, but he's a geologist, and he owns Fred's Hickory Inn now. And well, Mayor and Lana McCaslin, he was our mayor last term. They're very close. I just went to a memorial with them last week. But almost everybody there, do you know Rhonda and Hoff French? And Chris Suter, do you know any of the Suters? I don't know. I can't tell you.
Well, let me ask you this. You knew a lot of the mayors here.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories you can tell about them that maybe are just funny things or things you remember? Like maybe starting with Ernie Lawrence. What do you remember about him?
I've got a whole page full of Mayor Holdbacks. He was hard of hearing. And I know he pronounced words like he heard them. I'd go with him to a meeting. I remember going to the Bank of Bentonville. Bert Stacy was the president. And the mayor would take that thing off, put it in his pocket. We'd get to the meeting. They'd ask him something. He couldn't hear them. And I'd say, Mayor, is your hearing aid in your pocket? And he'd, oh, damn thing, you know. And he'd pull it out and put it on. But I've got a whole list of words, but I can't think of one of them now. But and I didn't want to laugh at him. He was the sweetest, good man, but he just couldn't hear. And he died in office. And then I forgot David Ford was interim mayor for a while. But I can't tell you.
What about the county judges? When you were on the court, you knew a lot of the judges over the years. Who are some of the ones you remember, and what are the ones you?
Well,
what do you think about?
I
them?
was especially fond of Kerry. Oh my, he lives at Decatur. But Bruce Rutherford was, I didn't serve under him, but I didn't care for Bruce. I think he was all for Bruce. Clyde Cummings, that last one that was drinking. I can't remember his name. Lives at Pea Ridge. But Barry is a good judge. But I can't think of any of those.
What do you like about our current judge? You said he was a good judge. What can you tell me about him?
I don't know much about him, but you know kind of how I judge elected officials. If you don't see their name in the paper too much. If they're just quietly doing their job, I think sometimes they're better. That's one of the things I like about him. You never read anything about Barry unless it's a news shot or something that the people need to know. But he's a family man. I think both of his sons are in the military, and he's really, really proud of them. And that makes me feel good when people are proud of their children. That's not always the case. And Susan likes him, and she respects his opinion. In fact, she wasn't going to run for office this time, and Barry and Tim Summers, you know Tim Summers, they both just pressed on her to run. They're getting some people in there that have not Arkansas ideas, if you know what I mean. They've got that questioning everything, good and bad. And it's a foreign thing to our people here. You know, our people are still pretty hometown. They still love each other and care about one another. That's not true of the foreigners. Some of them are wonderful, some are not.
Well, is there anything else you can think of that I haven't thought to ask you about? Maybe some of the interesting stories or things you remember?
My life's been pretty mundane. Nothing too exciting about it.
Now, when you were elected to the Quorum Court, were you the first woman on the court?
I was the first woman on the city council and the first woman on the Quorum Court.
So talk about that. Tell me about, have you had other women ask you about that? I mean, does that make you feel kind of like maybe you were a role model?
I've been told that. I've had people say, I want to be like you when I grow up. But I think part of that is my joy of life, the joy of friends and family. But see, most of my friends are dead. And here I am, as Tom O'Neill said, he said, Mary, I thought you were probably crippled up by now. And he said, here I come and you're working a funeral. And he said, you just keep going. And that's been a delight to me that people see me as someone to admire. And I feel like I'm the most down-to-earth person in the whole world. But I've been blessed with the best friends. I really have. And I don't know why. I'm always indebted to them.
So what are some of the stories? I mean, in the early days when you were on the city council, were you treated differently, or were you treated disrespectfully because you're a woman, and even if it was unintentional? What do you remember?
The men on the council were very nice to me, but they were all friends of my Uncle Jim, because he had been on the council with them, and he was highly respected. They treated me very graciously, but there wasn't a lot. I mean, it wasn't as hard as the Quorum Court, but the Quorum Court was a different story. Now, they were mostly Democrats, but the nice people to me were the Republicans. You've probably heard of Sherman Kenyon. Almost everybody loved Sherman Kenyon but me. But he could be really hateful. And I think my questions drove him crazy. See, when you don't know anything, all you can do is ask questions. That's the way I learned. And there was a Mr. Webb, who was a Democrat from Pea Ridge. He was a sweet, gentle man. He never was ugly. But Sherman could just get downright ugly. I think he thought he was funny. But it just didn't sit that way with me. But there was a guy, Paul Bynum from Siloam, sweet, good man, always nice and kind. And Dwayne Neal, do you know Dwayne Neal? I saw him in Walmart. He and Mary supported me even though I was a Democrat on the court. They were just so sweet, and Dwayne helped me. I'm not a financial expert, and Susan told me she was on the finance committee. I said, oh, Susan, that's the hardest job. Anywhere you are, that's the hardest job. I don't know why you wanted on that. She said, I like it, Mama. That's why I wanted to be on there. I like that. So, but those, in fact, anything that came up on the court that was controversial, they'd make me the chairman, because they knew I couldn't get any money if I didn't go to the department for the money or the advertisement or whatever I needed. So they put me in. The state passed a thistle law that the farmers were all going to have to kill all the thistles, and they were a growing problem. And I got to be the chairman of that committee. So I called the guy that had presented the bill in Little Rock. He was from Springdale. He gave me all this information about thistles, how many miles they could blow and how many acres they could infest and the harms they would do, and I don't remember what they were, but I went back to Council, and I gave them all that information. I made them listen to it, and then they didn't do nothing. Made me so mad at them. And I can walk around Ryan's farm, and there's thistles everywhere. They need to be sprayed, because those are blowing everywhere else. But well, one thing I did on the Quorum Court that I was really thankful for, they didn't have prayer at the beginning of the meeting. So I knew there was a lot of controversy, but I went to George Spence and I said, George, I would like to present an ordinance to the court that we have a moment of silence at the beginning of our meeting. And he said, well, Mary, why don't you just make an ordinance for a prayer to begin? I said, well, do you think it would pass? He said, well, let's try it. So I did, and we passed it. And they're still having prayer before. And I thought, if you didn't do nothing else, if you invoke God, you can't be too far wrong. And I've mostly been a supporter. Chris Suter and I, we worked a lot together. The city of Bentonville is a long ways up the road. And we had a good mayor. He was strong, Mayor McCashin. I don't know how things are going. I know the city's still growing. People are moving in droves. But the mayor told me the other day that he was sorry he had supported Stephanie Orman, the current mayor. He didn't feel like she was handling things the way she should. But I don't know. I've not made that judgment. I've had her out to lunch, and I like her fine. She seems like a good, very good person. But the mayor's a hard job. People expect your immediate response. And that's what I tried to do. I never had a request that I didn't go check out. And I would tell them sometimes, I can't do anything about this problem because of this and this and this, but I can send you to someone that I think might be able to. I'd always try to give them some hope that there might be some way to do it. But they liked immediate response. I didn't put them off or act like I didn't care. Some places I've gone to a lot of times, but that's okay. That's what they paid me for.
What are some of the memories, all your years of service, what are some of the success stories you have? I mean, like some of the things you're most proud of, and we talked about some of that earlier, but is there anything else you've done that you...
Well, you mean just in general?
Yeah, is there anything I'm missing?
Well, I've been really proud of our Boys and Girls Club. That I was on that board when we first started. I was proud of all the things that we've done at the Peel House. I'm really proud of our symphony in Fayetteville, but that's there, not here. But I've been part of so many things that would raise money, like our hospital auxiliary. I guess I've been in almost every organization that raised money. I was a member of Kiwanis for many years, got the achievement awards, and you know, there's nothing better you can do than help people. And that's kind of what I've been, I've got a whole bunch of stuff written down, but I don't want to talk about those. Those are just things I feel good about.
What's your favorite thing about public service? My favorite thing is
My favorite thing is helping people and knowing they can come to me and know that they'll get a response. Even though if I can't help them, I'll explain why.
I got a couple more questions here. If somebody came to you that you'd never met and said, hey, I know you're from Benton County, Arkansas. Tell me about Benton County. What would you tell them about Benton County to a stranger that wanted to know?
I would say there's so much going on in Benton County, but you know, in the early years, this was apple country and grape country. My daddy ran a storage place where they brought in bushels and bushels and bushels of apples for storage. The big trucks came up from the south with bananas that they'd put in storage for a while. They were green. I always thought that was interesting. But we're so far, we hardly have any railroad tracks anymore. But you know, look at us. I'm so proud of Walmart. Now, a lot of people don't like Walmart, but I want to tell you, they do wonderful things. They put the money and they do it well. And they do a lot of things for colleges and churches, people in general. And you know, when there's a catastrophe in America, they load up those big old trucks and they send food and toilet paper and everything. Benton County is one of the most giving counties in the United States. And I'm proud of that we're generous. And when things happen here in our city, you wouldn't believe all the clothes and the food and the stuff that people will bring. You know, there's nothing better than giving, especially to those that are hurting.
Good answer. So one last question here. Finish this sentence for me. My favorite thing about Benton County is?
The people. The people of Benton County are the favorite thing for me.
Anything else?
I love the climate. I like the change of seasons. Summer, winter, spring, and fall. They're all just a new excitement when they come around. That and the people. What else have you got?